Okay, welcome back. I hope this is recording. I'll see in a minute if it thinks it's live. All right, thinks I'm live. Okay, welcome back. Last time we talked very briefly about Ghidra and then did some resource gathering, basic base building in Minecraft. This time we're going to focus almost exclusively on Ghidra. As I said before, Ghidra is a tool released by the NSA for reverse engineering binaries, reverse engineering software. This type of tool is very useful when having to examine an executable that you don't have the source code for. Things like it's very good for finding out what viruses and other malware do. Also is used sometimes to write viruses and other malware. So like any tool, it often has a lot of uses. In this case, the intended uses are up to debate. Anyway, so Ghidra, I had it import the Minecraft 1.14 server jar. In this case, it took it a while, so we started at the last video, and now we have it running. Now we have it imported. You can see in a jar there are a bunch of class files, and there are several directories representing the namespace organization of the Java classes. This is typical for Java jar. Now, I have not programmed Java professionally in over a decade, so some of this I may be a little bit slow. I do C++ and Java at this point, or C++ and C at this point. So a lot of the principles apply across languages. I just may not remember all of the details for Java. The starting symbol for any Java program is main. Most languages have some variation on main. In C and C++, you have the main function. When you get into embedded C, it often maps to main, but you may end up with a vector of function pointers, one of which points to an underscore start. It really depends on what platform and what type of application you're programming. In this case, we're going to look at the net Minecraft server Minecraft server class. Now, in order to figure out what's going on, Ghidra has to analyze the class. It has to analyze the binary to determine, first of all, what instructions are there. You have to reverse disassemble. And then it also attempts to produce, for most binaries, it produces C code that roughly that is supposed to match the assembly. For Java, it does appear to produce Java code instead. So at this point, we're going to analyze it, and we're going to select everything except for these two. Now, this is in Ghidra 9.0. Currently 9.0.2 has been released, but it has a bug in it that breaks decompilation of most Java that I've tested on. So right now I'm using 9.0 just to avoid that bug. The bug has been fixed in their GitHub repository, but they have not released a new version that has the bug fixed. As near as I can tell, none of the functional changes between 9.0 and 9.0.2 should impact what I'm doing. So I'm just going to work with 9.0 until they release 9.0.3. So other than these prototype, beta quality analysis, I'm going to run all the analyses. I'm going to have it run to analyze. So this is going to take it a minute. It's going to go through and try and figure out about this class. And you can see down here it's making progress, and it finished. So when we pick a function, I'm going to actually maximize this. I'm going to pick the function. Where is it? In main. Okay, this is the main function. Okay, you can see here It gives the prototype of the function. Here is the return type. Main returns void. The first parameter is a pointer to a string. That is your array of strings. Here you can see the disassembly. This is Java bytecode and the assembly mnemonics for the bytecode. And then some of the things it's doing. This is the different functions that are being called. So this is useful. Sometimes the code that it generates is incorrect, so it can be helpful to make sure that the disassembly matches up with the code. Over here is the disassembled code. You can see here's the function prototype, and we've got our opening bracket. If we go down to the bottom, we've got our closing bracket that matches. Now, the first thing it does is it analyzes your stack frame and figures out all the objects that you have on the stack and lists them at the beginning. Most languages, or most compilers, when they generate a binary, no matter how you scope them in your original code, it will lift all of your local functions up to the, or local variables, sorry, up to the function level and reference them from there, rather than introducing a new subframe on the stack at each scope. So the scope is a language level construct to encourage better use of variables. In this case, that language level construct has been lost, when it went down to, when it went through the compiler, and there really isn't a way for it to automatically reconstruct that. So the first thing we're going to do, let's look at this. Since we know main is our entry point, I'm going to rename the variable, and I'm going to name this args. I come from a C++ background. You've got argv and argc. In this case, argv because it is a vector, or in this case a string array of arguments. So it has gone through, and if we look down here, right now this is named argv, and over in the disassembly it has shown it's renamed as argv. And if we search in here, you'll see down here it is renamed the reference to it. Okay, so it's only referenced once. So there's our first thing. We can rename the variables it comes up with. It doesn't have good variable names. It doesn't know what they're used for. In Java, due to the bytecode, it can deduce most of the types of the arguments, but it doesn't know what the variables are for. So in this case, it knows this is an array of type object. Doesn't know what it's for. So it gives it a pretty generic name. And this is a pointer to an object. In this case, it's an array of object pointers. And it's a variable 1, variable 2, object ref. These are very generic variable names that are unlikely to be useful to anybody in practice. Now, so we're going to save this right now, just because I don't want to have to go through all that again. At this point, I've only gone through and renamed one variable. Let's take a look at some of these other functions in the Minecraft server class. So I'm going to pick this one. Okay, you'll see again it has its function parameters, really generic names, param1, param2. I don't understand in Java, a void pointer. Again, it's trying to translate roughly into C, and Java doesn't necessarily translate to C well. But you can see we've got a void pointer type, and we've got parameters named, and we have more functions. I was hoping for something a little simpler. Here we go. Okay, so this one, you'll see that this returns an integer, and it takes an integer. Param L is some struct type. It has a member W, and I believe this is a 0 extend into an int. So I'm curious. Let's see if we can find int. So type int has a member W. That doesn't make sense to me. So once again, we're going to have to eventually go through it. I'm not going to bother at this point since I don't know what this function is used for. So we could find, let's see, can we find, now like I said, I'm learning to use this tool. I'm sure there are shortcuts, there are quick ways to do this. Right now I want to see if I can find the call sites. Analyze stack. I don't know. Anyway, so we've got some pretty simple ones. And then even this one, you can see over here it shows the control flow. We can see where it's going to go based on branches, and we can figure out what's going to happen. You know, it's really convenient that it shows where branches are jumping to. And you can see here, once again, we have the same layout. In this case, it's a bunch of nested if-else. There's a good chance that this was done differently in the actual code. For instance, in code, you're unlikely to say if Boolean equals false. You're probably just going to say if not Boolean. But this is a very literal translation of the assembly. So that's pretty much what it does. There's all kinds of different functions. We've got different variables available. What does it export? What does it import? In this case, we just have the class. So let's go back here and let's try looking at this and figuring out what's going on. So one of the things that inhibits us is we have a bunch of variables with terrible names. They're as good as the decompiler can do. Not useful for me, probably not useful to most people. So at this point, I guess we start at the beginning. So an options parser. Options parser is a class in the Java library. It is option parser. Let's see. Okay, that doesn't help me. So that means this is probably our options. So let's rename this to options. Okay, now over here, you'll see that we do have, it looks like an array of 14. Okay, again, this is trying to do C from Java. Java doesn't translate great to C. But now that we have options, let's see if we can find where this is used. Okay, so this is passing command line arguments, because I know that no GUI is one of the command line arguments. So this looks like options is being used to figure out what command line arguments, what command line options it can accept. Now if we keep going down here, Options accepts non-options. Interesting. Options. Okay. So options.parseArgv. Okay. So if we don't have some argument, then we're going to return false, or we're going to have a system error. So it is an error. We require a certain argument. Okay. We know this is all command line parsing, and this is saying if a certain argument doesn't exist, then it's an error, and we need to exit out. Excuse me. And we're going to print help on the system error output. So cool. We've already, with only renaming 2 variables, figured out what a lot of these are used for. So now that we have options, let's start renaming some of these. And that is an L. Is that a Shift L? Control L? Huh. So it's got an L. No GUI option. Okay. And it's gone down and it's replaced any use of it. Okay. So let's rename this one. Init settings option. Okay, and I expect this might be a little faster on a newer computer. My computer is several years old, but so far it's been sufficient for my needs. Okay. Rename demo option. Rename bonus chest option. Force upgrade option. Erase cache option. Rename help option. Okay. So, and okay. So if we go up here, we're seeing a lot of these option builders have been renamed. There's still some that it doesn't have renamed, but that's fine. So we've actually made pretty good progress. Help option for help, I don't know. So I really need to know what this option spec builder is. Option spec builder. Okay. Jopt. Okay, so these are new libraries. I've never used these before. So I'm hoping this is the right one. It looks about right. So since we're down here and we are looking at where do we go? For help. Let's see if there's a for help member on this. For help. Okay, abstract option spec. Wow, that is not a helpful description. Tells whether this option is help option. Missing required will not cause parsing to fail. Okay, so if we get this is for help and for help, it looks like for help just specifies that the option is the help option, so that it doesn't fail to parse if you're missing a command. So let's rename this one is help option, is option help. Okay, so I'm curious. Is option help? Okay. Okay, so that actually is used. That looks to be what is causing our, or the thing that it is branching on here to determine if it's an error. So that's kind of cool. Rename single player option. Yeah, there's some interesting things with the way this highlights. I'm not sure the why. Maybe it's a bug, maybe it's a feature. I don't know enough to know for sure. With required args. So single player option is an option spec builder, which is option spec builder and with required arg. Let's see where that is. With required arg. It informs an optional parser. This requires an argument. Okay, so that's just saying we must have an argument. So if you're going to have a single player, it requires some argument. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. Okay. Universe option. Looks like the universe option also has a required argument. So let's see, universe argument. So we have a new array of objects. I have no idea what that's for. Let's see if we can find it. Okay. Defaults 2. Okay. Universe argument. Let's see. Universe argument is argument accepting option spec. Anyway, so far we can see that the first part is parsing command line arguments, and that would generally be expected. Often you'll decide what to do based on your command line arguments, and in this case it's no exception to that common use case. It's right now we're specifying what arguments it expects, what it's allowed to do with it. Excuse me. When we get down to here, it parses the actual arguments and then continues executing. So honestly, this is not a terribly long function, a couple hundred lines. And of those 213-ish lines, a lot of them are function arguments. We're down to line 91. Now, obviously some things are quicker to go through. Looking at the function arguments, looking at these, you can't really get much information out of these until you get down to the actual code. So, unfortunately, it just gets long. That's just the way these things work. But this is just, to me, this is really cool. You know, you can do this kind of work from the assembly. You know, if you know the assembly well, you can work in assembly and figure out what's going on. For most of us, that's a pain. And even for people who are good at it, it's a pain. It helps to have the higher level constructs so that you can more easily see flow control and see what it's doing. An example of where the assembly is going to be less useful than the decompiled code is on x86. It is very common for compilers to generate LEA, load effective address, to do arithmetic, because it can do an addition and a multiply in one clock cycle, as opposed to using the hardware multiplier, which, depending on your processor, can take a few instructions. And so you'll see a good optimizer generate insane sequences of LEAs to do math. I'm not good enough to figure out what they mean, but likely you're going to get at least something vaguely useful in the disassembly, as opposed to LEA, 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 and have a sequence of 5 or 10 or 20 LEAs that just mean nothing to most people. So, it helps to do this. If you're familiar with the assembly for the processor, it can be helpful to also go over here. It is nice that if I pick something here, it will highlight over here the code. And if I pick something over here, you can see it starts highlighting over here. So it really is helpful that it can go either way. And I did something that it's not expecting. Oh well. So far this is actually pretty cool. To me, this is pretty awesome. Now I'm going to go over to, let's look at universe argument. It is argument accepting option spec. Let's see. Once again, Google is your friend. Okay, and that has, okay, defaults 2. Defaults 2. Okay, so we either have, so we've got 2 overloads. One either takes an array of values, and the other one takes a value and a variadic list. So this is interesting. We have a dot and then an array of 0, which has got to be saying we have one value and nothing else. So let's see if this is used anywhere else. Oh. You get used to Control V and it gets, okay, we get a new object. That means that this one gets collected, passed in as defaults to, okay, so this appears to just be used for the variadic argument. So I'm going to rename this to empty variadic argument parameters, or rename variable empty variadic. Okay, so now we know what this has done, and we're just passing in a dot to the universe argument if it is not provided. Now I don't know what universe does. Don't know. So let's see what this is used for. Is this used again? Value of. Okay. Universe argument. PAR. We're accepting option spec. So does our document specifies default values. Specifies a value, returns self, so the caller can add clauses to the Fluent interface system. Okay, so this is Fluent interface. So this is really just the same object. It returns universe argument. Since it returns universe argument, it aliases universe argument. It's just a reference to the same object. So what that means is the actual code that was written didn't look anything like this. Rather than have all these temporaries and then calling functions on each one, they just chained off of the temporaries, and the temporary went out of scope, gets released by the garbage collector at some point, and everybody's happy. And this is a case where, because it's supposed to be a Fluent library, it's very obvious that code was not written as this is. That's one of the problems that you get with a decompiler. You've lost information. You're trying to recover as best as you can the actual information. In this case, not so much you can do. You get kind of ugly stuff. Now, there may be some way of forcing this to rewrite. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far into Ghidra. Like I said, I'm still learning. So let's get through this. Rename first argument alias. Name world option. Okay. Name world argument. Rename port option. Okay. Accepts port. Variable. This is port argument. Now this is again something where we're going to see they created an option, and they chained it's required, and that, or sorry, this is the option. They created an option port. They said the port is required, so they would have just chained this off of here, and this is saying it has to be an integer. I'm sure that's what it is. So let's go over here. Okay, with required argument. But we have of type specifies a type to which argument the specs option are to be converted, which means it's likely a parse error if it is a string that cannot be parsed as an integer. So, excuse me, argument, and then this of type, what does it return? Self. Okay. Port argument alias. Okay. So we're starting to see that when this was written, they probably did options.accepts port dot with required argument dot of type integer.class. Okay. So you really start to see the way the code was written, even though you don't have it in front of you. It really is useful. I'll need to figure out if there's a way to rewrite this to say you're doing object chaining, or function chaining, sorry. Just rewrite it as function chaining. I don't know. Not sure that that's available, but we'll see. Okay, so we have an integer of value 1, negative 1. Okay. Okay. So, because defaults to requires the array of objects, or the single object and then the variadic arguments. In this case, it has to box a -1. It can't just pass -1 in, because this requires some type of object. So this is boxing -1. So box neg1. Okay. And this looks like the same thing as this empty variadic. Let's see if we can find this. Yep. Interesting. Not sure why it didn't decide to use the same object array of 0. Don't know. So empty variadic 2. I'm going to rename this empty variadic 1. Save it. Always save. Computers crash. Bad things happen. Always save. Alias, port argument, alias, alias. So these are all references. They're all handles. In this case, we have three handles, 3 references to port argument. Okay. This is server ID option. And server ID argument. P-invar non-options. Options is option parser. Right. Okay. And again, this type of thing can be really useful. We now have documentation for the function. Never discount documentation, especially when you don't know what you're doing. Right now, what I'm going through, I really only care about this non-options function. Non-options. Gives an object that represents an access point for non-option arguments on a command line. That doesn't help me. So let's see if there's some description of non. Okay. An argument consisting of only 2 hyphens signals that the remaining arguments are to be treated as non-options. Okay, so this is saying everything after the double hyphen is a non-option. Whatever that means, that's what the library treats it as. Consisting only of a single hyphen, is considered a non-option argument. Can be an Okay. Anyway, so this is talking about non-options. Okay. curious, is this ever actually used? It is. Cool. It means it actually does read the value of the non-options. Don't know what it does with them. We also have parse. Parse is to be expected. How much you want to bet? Parse returns whether or not it had success parsing. Parse. Parses the given command line arguments according to the option specification. Returns an option set regarding the parsed options or arguments and any non-option arguments found. Okay. Right. I'm used to C, C++, or to C in particular. You don't throw exceptions in C. You return if there was failure, if there was success. In this case, we return the arguments. Otherwise, we throw an exception if something went wrong. Okay. Rename. And this is, nope, not that one. Off by one. Excuse me. Parsed arguments. Okay, and this one is saying, do we have is option help? Gas. Has is option help. Okay. So is there a way to rewrite? Nope, that's not it. So we get to here. We have a help option. We're going to print out on standard error, and we're going to return. So at this point, we figured out what the argument, first of all, we know what command line arguments, command line parameters are available, and we know which ones have defaults, and we know which ones are mandatory. That's actually pretty cool. That's some really good information. Now from here, we start getting into starting the Minecraft server. That is useful information, and I think we'll get into that next time. So at this point, I'm going to call this good in Ghidra. We are going to start the server. Start Minecraft. Okay, start the latest. This should already have a spawn area. Done. Wow. 0, 1, 2, 4, 60. Okay. And okay, found it. Local, joining world, and we're back. And of course it's night. Of course it's night. No pickaxe. So I'm gonna make a. You forget all kinds of quality of life stuff that mods give you. You forget which ones are mods and which aren't. Turns out a lot of this stuff that they add to Minecraft that's quality of life related was originally in a mod somewhere. Okay. We went out quite a ways, so ooh. I will not complain. Redstone and gold, useful. Gold is more useful in a lot of modded Minecraft, but not something to sneer at. I do miss the mods where they have a way of, or where they show a red X or a yellow X depending on the light level, so you can really quickly see if mobs are going to spawn. Really nice for when you're going out mining and you don't want to let mobs into your base. Instead, I just got to kind of count. Or use F3, either way. Interesting. Cool. I think that will set me on fire. So yeah, resource gathering, you do a lot of it at the beginning. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where hopefully you have farms. And then resource gathering becomes something you do less and less. You just AFK and come back hours, days later, depending on what you need. And you're gold. Now, one of the other things that is nice in modded Minecraft is having chunk loaders, so it doesn't unload chunks, and you can just guarantee that your farms and stuff and equipment are running even when you're not nearby. Make sure your food is growing, other useful stuff. You know, one of the projects that really impressed me is the one that they had on SciCraft, where they were able to prevent chunks from being unloaded. I don't know the details. It was 100 by 100 or 100 chunks diagonal that they cleared out, and they did some looked to be relatively trivial redstone contraption, and somehow that would make sure that it picked those to be unloaded, and then I don't know the details. So, you know, that's one of the things I would love to learn through Ghidra, is the details of how it does things like that and how to implement that kind of thing. For now, we need food. This is just so awesome. And right. see, do we have an apple? We've got an apple. Lapis can be used for blue dye, I think. Okay. So far so good. Got, oh, wrong one. 16 iron, which gives me 2 coal. And let's see. Some more torches. And torches. Okay. Couple of stacks of redstone, always useful. And we've got iron. Now, how far back does this go? Not really. Oh, I need string. I don't want to go out and kill a spider. You have iron armor though. Okay. Do we have a time of day on here? Okay, I'm not seeing a time of day. That's too bad. That's a really useful thing. Okay. So, I think what we'll do is we'll go down here a little bit and we're going to try and build an AFK fishing farm. Really useful for getting early game enchantments. Fortunately, they're relatively simple to make. I think we have everything. And if we don't, we can get it. Yeah, short ceilings make me claustrophobic. We're going to dig up one. Classic, don't dig directly over your head. You do not want sand or any of that stuff to fall on top of fall on you. Okay, should be big enough. Now, I think we need, it used to be, you could use note block. I think at this point you use a item frame. Which probably needs leather. Okay. Starting to run low on time. Low on food. Life's good. Hey, look, a sheep. A soon-to-be very dead sheep. Another very dead sheep. Ooh. Maybe I can get enough to build a bed. One. I don't know if it's trying to get away from me or if that just is luck on its part. And I've got enough. I've got 2 wool. Bed. Cows and sheep. I can get a leather. I can probably make an item frame. Okay. That should be enough to make an item frame. Be enough to make a bed. All important things early on. Hope this is the way I came from. Pretty sure it is. It is. Let's get back to base and call it a day. Squid. Be nice to turn it today whenever I need to. Don't worry too much. So some beef, some mutton, some apples. At least got a little bit of food. And I need 3. Yep. I've been playing a mod where one. Oh, do they all have to be the same color? Yeah, they all gotta be the same color. Bed, and then we have item frame, leather and sticks. So 1 leather and some sticks. Looks like I need 8 sticks. 8. And item frame. Okay, this has been fun. Looks like we made some good progress. We have a better understanding of how arguments are parsed, and we have a good feel for what arguments are available to the Minecraft server. So next time, I think we'll start off probably by building an AFK fishing farm and see a little more about what happens once it has the arguments. So I'm glad everybody could be with me and could join me on this journey and this experience. So have a good day.